pilot's fist went bam right square in me.
Well, if you're going to start, Dave, why don't you tell them about your experience about maybe starting with the 8th and then it becoming the 9th and that you drove the plane. Tell them about it.
And when you got there, when did you get there? In England, when did you get there?
We got to England on my mother's birthday, the 2nd of February, '44. It was blackout, and you were told to go find your hut. It was sunrise before any of us found our huts. And we went for Braintree's where the train stopped, and we got out and they took us up to the field. About the second night we had an air raid on the wall. So we all run out of our huts, get into the what's so-called bomb shelters that wouldn't have stopped a firecracker. And after the all clear, we went back in. Well, the second night, we just went out to the doorway of the bomb shelter. The third night, we called up on the top of it, and from the 4th Night Army never went anywhere.
Well, Dave, didn't you have a kind of a scary experiences in one of your plane missions? Didn't you have kind of a scary thing to happen?
Oh.
I've heard so many stories, but I think yours was one of those.
It seems on my 45th mission on the 5th day of August, we were assigned a bridge back behind the lines. And we went in and we bombed. But we were supposed to have 10-second delay fuses so that we could get out from under because we were flying so low. Well, the ordnance man made a mistake and put 1/10 of a second. And so just as he's bombing off, we could see our wings go big. So we started back. We were only about 4 miles from the channel. But our navigator had made a mistake and taken us into German held territory. We were flying in American held territory at the time. Well, I slipped my hat off on my flat helmet, my flak vest, and just started to fly again. And all hell broke loose. It was black everywhere. The Germans were firing at us with tanks. And about the time I got out to the channel, I noticed a rather small hole in the left accessory section. And I couldn't understand how if a shell came up through that it wouldn't clean out everything in there that controlled the engine. So I kept on going all the way back to the base. So I got back to the base, landed, went up the taxiway, and there were a lot of soldiers watching the planes return, and they pointed at my plane. I said, what in the world do they see? They can't see the left-hand side of my plane. When I got into my hard stand, my crew chief almost fainted. They're 18 inches back of my head. And 88 went in one side, on the right side, out the left side, and glanced off the accessory section. Wow. Just 18 inches back of my head. I knew I'd been in combat then.
Amen. What kind of altitudes did you fly?
No, only 12,000 feet.
Okay.
Occasionally we get up to 15,000 feet.
Okay.
And you know, the lack of oxygen, you're not supposed to be above 10,000 without putting on an oxygen mask. In the military, you can go as high as 15,000.
Okay.
Well, one of my guns passed out from not strong enough oxygen. And I got tired, but just as soon as I got down to 12,000 again, cleared right up.
Would you typically drop your bombs at that altitude or lower altitude?
Normally we drop it at the higher altitude.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Folks, I think you ought to hear from this gentleman on my right.
Flying Fortress.
nobody who flew airplanes ever entertained the idea of being on the ground or in the water. We don't swim too good, and it's a long walk back home. And this gentleman, oh boy, 70 years ago, 72 I guess it is now, was in that D-Day launch. I was still in the States. I was not overseas at the time of the landing. But I've heard the stories and I've seen the pictures. He's a walking miracle.
Well, tell your story,
Richard
Richard.
James.
Thank you very much, sir. I can also remember the Americans coming over. Of course, we called them Yanks. We didn't call them Americans.
We saw that down here in the South too.
And once we saw the planes, the B-17s, of course, then we heard about all of the armaments on board. So, of course, they eventually got the name of the Flying Fortress. Of course, they were just like a fortress with guns everywhere. But anyway, I was up here at the chapel some years back, and there was a gentleman in there with his family, and we happened to sort of got talking, and he said, you was down on the beach? I said, yes sir, I was on the beach. Oh my goodness. He said, thank goodness I wasn't on the beach. He said, I was in a plane. I said, yeah, thank goodness I wasn't in a plane, I was on the beach. I said, whichever way we looked at it. But anyway, of course, on the D-Day landings, I did see some of the 8th Air Force fly on over. So really the 8th Air Force and the Royal Marines went in together. They were on basically the American beaches, but the Canadian beach was in the centre, and I was selected for a special assignment, and I had no idea what it was going to eventually mean, because we had 16 American landing craft that were built down here in New Orleans, and these were called LCM, Landing Craft Mechanized, and these were the ones with the open deck, and it was big enough to carry one tank, one truck, or about 60, 70 troops. And the idea was that they wanted to get out of the 16 landing craft. They selected 3 of us. I was the engineer down in the engine room, and they selected 3 of us, and we started training with 3 Royal Engineers who were involved in setting ammunition, TNT, mines and stuff like that. So we trained with them at night time and on the east coast of England, and eventually when it got close to D-Day, which of course we had no idea when D-Day was going to be, but this was the end of May. Okay, you 3 landing craft go down to the south of England, and away we went down to Southampton, and when we got down there, the place was absolutely covered with hundreds of American large landing craft. These were the LCTs and LCI for infantry, and we sailed on in, and all of a sudden we had a signal that we could not tie up to any of the landing craft. We had to go to a buoy and tie up to the buoy and not touch any landing craft because of our explosives that we had on board. And they were all, it was all open. I mean, so, you know, a bullet or anything else like that would have blown the whole thing up. So we were there then just before D-Day, and eventually we got the word, like everybody did, on the 5th of June, that was going to be D-Day, but then it was cancelled because the sea was like this. It was rocking all the landing craft, and it was really bad. I mean, say you could see a landing craft in front, and then it would disappear in the wave. The wave would come up, and then of course you would eventually go down, and then of course you couldn't see the landing craft in front. So eventually, of course, we got the okay to go the next day, and off we went, and of course all the big landing craft took off, and we followed, but we couldn't keep up with them because we were much smaller. We were 50 foot long, about as long as this room, and we then would sail in between the three lines of these big landing craft. So we did that until it got to night time, and then of course once it got to night time, we had no navigation, we had no instruments, no nothing. It was just the fact that when we were in the daylight we would go by the sun, and then at night time of course the stars, and eventually of course we got through into the early morning, and once we got through into the early morning with a little bit of daylight, then of course we could see the big ships, the battleships. So we'd no more done that, and it was like between 4, 5 and 6, getting close to 7, and as we sailed on in, then the battleships opened up, and as they opened up we could see the red hot shells landing, going over onto the beach, all the way along the beach, blowing up the battlements, the defences, and of course a lot of the homes and the houses, they all got blown to pieces. So by the time we got there, there was a whole bunch of damaged and blown up places.
Richard, how old were you at this time on D-Day?
I joined the Marines at 17, and I was trained then for a whole year on landing craft, and of course the regular training, and I took all sorts of training on engines because I was in charge of the engines, and by the time it came to D-Day I was 18, and of course by that time me and people my age, of course we had been involved in the war for 6 years by that time, because the war broke out in 1939 for us. So I was well trained by that time, being involved in all sorts of defence forces. But anyway, as we went on in and the shelling started, then of course we could see the beach then. So we headed for the beach, and we had one sailor on board, midshipman, and evidently he must have guided us to that particular point, because out of all of the beaches, this was the one point. This right here was where we had to land and get our explosives and TNT off the landing craft. And the reason for it was that the planners for D-Day had realized that Juno Beach had a 8-foot high concrete sea wall, and they realized, evidently, all of this is history now, but not at the time, they realized, of course, then the Canadian tanks that would be landing on Juno Beach, on the Canadian beach, would not be able to get off the beach because of this concrete wall. So what they did, then they sent us in, us 3 guys, and my other 2 guys, my other 2 landing craft didn't make it. They were not there. So I was the only one that made it on our landing craft and got the guys off with the explosives and the TNC. So we made it without getting hit. And seconds later, then we got hit. The sea was still rolling, and as we were rolling back and forth, there was this big Canadian tank came right up alongside my landing craft. And of course, it was just seconds. I turned and looked at him. Seconds, he turned and looked at me. And then we both looked forward. And as we looked forward, I saw his out the side of my eye, I saw his cannon raise up, and a shell went, he put a cannon shell right through the church steeple. I had no idea why, but we found out afterwards that there was 3 French ladies who were up there in the church steeple sniping. And eventually, some of the Canadians realized this, and when they got ashore, they found that there was a tunnel leading up to the church, and of course they went in and went up and found these, and all of this we found out afterwards. They found these 3 French ladies, and of course they did no more. They just, okay, you are friends of the Germans. So of course that happened a lot. The French ladies did fraternize with the Germans, because the Germans were there a long time. But anyway, we carried on and we were sinking. So as we were sinking, then we bumped into the control ship and had a big a rope net on the side. So, hey guys, you know, so there was 4 of us. So we jumped onto the net, and of course, as I turned around, my landing craft disappeared under the water. And at that point, I realized I couldn't swim. So I was lucky, real lucky, the second time after the landing to get out of trouble. So we went up on top and got inside the control ship. And of course, at that point, it was a case of just minding your own business, because the attack was still going on. Everybody was off the beach by that time, as we got blown up. But everybody was off the beach by then, and the only thing you could do was to see the bodies floating around in the water, in the seawater, and that went on for 2 days. The bodies were floating around, coming out of the tanks and stuff like that, and the sailors on board my control ship that I got onto, the sailors were on board, and they had, you know what a hammock is, and they were picking up these bodies, putting them in hammocks and stitching up the hammocks. So I just happened to be walking by, because it was, you know, there's nothing else you could do. You know, you've just been saved, and I saw the sailor, and he had this body, and I saw the guy's toes sticking up like that, and I looked at the sailor and went like that on this deceased person's toes, and said, "Hey buddy, but for the grace of God, go away." And of course, the next day we had the control ship went out, because this is 24 hours later. So we just went out to sea, and we had a burial at sea, and buried about a dozen guys that had been picked up and stitched up by the sailors. So at that time, of course, then we were involved in getting on board our cargo ship that came over from England with the rest of our 16 landing craft, because there was only 3 of us. So the other 13 landing craft came on over on this cargo ship, and okay, you know what you've got to do? No. As far as they were concerned, we were goners in the invasion. There was no description of anything after the invasion, because they wanted at least 1 out of the 3 to get there, and we were the 1. So eventually, okay, you guys, this cargo ship, see the landing craft? That's your guys. So they put us on this ship, and eventually we found out then that our next job would be, for the rest of the time, whatever it might be, to get the landing craft off onto the beach, because the advance had taken forward and they were off the beach now. So we got the landing craft off, and then we were assigned to one, and then we found what we had to do was the other thing was to go back and forth to the cargo ships with the supplies on, to bring the supplies to the Canadians, because we had no other way to get supplies to the troops. So this was real good planning, I would say, on whoever planned the D-Day, because there we were then on our landing craft, ferrying the supplies, the ammunition and the food and everything else to the Canadians waiting on the beach. And of course we'd got the tanks off the beach, and then we did that for 7 weeks. We stayed there 7 weeks, 24 hours a day, back and forth, and eventually that came to an end when the officer, okay you guys, form up on the beach. So of course 7 weeks later we formed up on the beach. Okay, we're going to go back to England. Oh my goodness, thank goodness, we get to see our girlfriends and go to the pub. Fantastic. And we find out that the Americans had captured Cherbourg. So when the Americans captured Cherbourg, then we had a port, and of course then they could take the supplies around to Cherbourg and put them in onto all of the people that needed them. So that was the end of our 7 weeks in Normandy, as far as being lucky, yeah, I was lucky to get away with that 3 times, and since I've been back home, of course I've been back 50th anniversary, 55th anniversary, 60th anniversary, 65th anniversary, and I've gone back to gone to England and then to Normandy with Marine buddies that were with me at that time, and it was just really fantastic. The French people just really appreciated it. So any veteran that had been in Normandy during the invasion and so forth, then if you went back on any of those anniversaries, they would present to you in any one of the big chapels and the big cathedrals, they would present to you a commemorative Normandy medal. So that was very impressive. And then of course last year we got a call, okay, they want to present any of the veterans that are still living and able to go to the French consulate to get the French Medal of Honor. So I was lucky again. I went there and of course got the French medal, and I was talking to my American lady during all of these visits. I was put in touch with an American lady who was born in Boston, and she went to Normandy with the American consulate, and she eventually married to an Englishman. Eventually, after 30 years, he passed away. So somehow she got remarried to a French officer, and when I was introduced to her, I'd called my friend in England. I said, oh, I've been told to meet this lady, Frances, and oh, Richard, I see her every year. See, I go over from Portsmouth, he said, and that's one of my friends. Really? So of course, when I went over, I got in touch with my friend. He took me over to France and got introduced to this American lady. And evidently, she had been so involved in the war, after the war, that she was instrumental in getting different groups together for the different Americans, British, Canadians, and all that sort of stuff. So she was awarded all sorts of honors and stuff like that. And I spoke to her about 2 months ago, and now she's getting under the weather because she's about the same age, and she's getting under the weather. So all we can do is commiserate. You know, I cannot go to Normandy anymore because too much of a flight and stuff like that. But anyway, that's the basic story of D-Day. And any questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Were you ever able to figure out what actually caused your landing craft to sink?
What was that now?
What was the major cause for your landing craft sinking?
Oh, okay. The reason was that just after I got the ammunition off and the high explosives, then we got the ramp down, and like I say, I looked at this guy in the tank, and within seconds after we got the guys off with the explosives, then there was this big wave came on in and pushed us over onto the iron steel, and right on top would be, if you look close enough on some of the films, you'll see a little round metal thing at the top.
Tellermine. Yeah.
Okay, and that is the tellermine.
Yeah.
So that if you touch it, then of course it blows a hole in your landing craft.
Gotcha.
So nearly all of those obstacles, all the way along the American beach, Canadian, had those obstacles covered, and that's what blew a hole in my landing craft. And of course then, fortunately, I was at the other end of the landing craft when it got blown open, and like I say, that rope ladder saved my life because the landing craft disappeared below the water, and I couldn't swim, not a stroke. Yeah.
Thank
Any
you.
more questions?
Richard, do you have any of those medals from the French on your cap?
Any more what?
The medals that you got from the French, Normandy, are any of those on your hat?
Oh yeah, when I went to the Juno Beach museum during the summertime, and especially during the reunion and stuff like that, there would be students from Canada who would be over there for the purpose of manning the museum. So while I was there, of course, then I got this one here for Juno and Juno Canadian and so forth. And then they gave me, and next time I went back, then I got the Canadian leaf that is on their flag. So I got that one. And the other one on this side here is because I belong to my Royal Marine comrades, Normandy Veterans Association. And that was the trips I made, 55 and 60, 65, so forth, yeah. But last year was when I got my French Medal of Honor, and that was in the December, yeah.
Like,
I can contribute a little bit to the D-Day because I had a mission on D-Day also. But I didn't go on the first 2 missions that our group flew. They're assigned what they call on a loading list. It tells you what plane you're going to fly, what position you're going to fly, and like that. And I didn't get on those first 2 loading lists. And I was getting pretty disappointed because it got about 6 o'clock that night and I hadn't been on the mission. So at 7 o'clock, the French underground reported to the British that Hitler had released the division of tanks that he'd held up in the Pas-de-Calais area. And it normally took about 3 hours from the time we got what we call a field order until we had all the planes gathered up and in flight heading for the target. In 1 hour, we were all 37 airplanes were in the air. we crossed the English Channel about 150 feet off the water so that the radar couldn't pick us up. And as we were coming into France, the B-26 outfit was coming out, and they were just shooting the daylights out of the B-25s. They didn't bother to cool their guns, they just turned them on us. So we went in, we were about 40 miles from the target. And we went in, and they were just shooting everything. I've never seen so much flak in my life. And I happened to look out the side window of my plane, and I saw a German officer in a barn doorway firing a Luger at us. It struck me funny, and I just relaxed. And we went on in, and we were supposed to bomb from 7,000 feet, I believe it was, and the weather pushed us down to about 3. And at the briefing, the general said, "I don't give a damn if none of you get back. Get that train." And we did. But we left 3 planes in France and 2 in England that didn't make it back. So, as we were starting to turn away from the target, we dropped a bomb. And we were starting to turn away. My flight leader turned in to the left, and I was on the right-hand side. And the left pilot, when he got caught in what they call a cone fire from the ground, and took out his left engine. But because he was flying on the right-hand side of the leader, he was, or the left-hand side, he was looking out the right-hand side, and he couldn't see that engine burning. So we were supposed to keep radio silence, and I saw him burning. I said, "It's the hell with radio silence, they know where we are." And I called him and told him he was on fire. And I saw him reach down, shut the gas off, but it didn't stop the fire. So he just jettisoned his canopy and pulled the plane up just as steep as he could, stuck his head into the slipstream, and it carried him over the tail. Fortunately, he cleared the tail, and we saw his chute open. Well, I thought that the 2 gunners probably were killed by that minute they were firing on the ground. And it turned out they both successfully got out.
Good. But you flew above, Richard, D-Day went on, it wasn't a day, I mean, it took weeks to get everybody really off the beach, right? So my question is, Dick, you probably flew a lot of missions actually in support of that.
Oh, yes.
I saw them come on over and get shot down, and they would dive into the channel, and then of course we had Royal Air Force rescue boats, and they would come along the channel, pick up the Americans, and that went on quite some time. But our final chapter was that when I told you that, okay, we've got a port now, the Americans have captured Cherbourg, then okay, you guys are going to go back to England, okay, 8 o'clock in the morning, assemble, and we just all got on our remaining landing craft.
What was that date? When was that?
That was June.
About?
June, just a moment, June 6th. It was July the 22nd.
So D-Day really, in a sense, went on for weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you flew a lot of missions to support that.
So that, at that time, of course, then we got on the landing craft and off we went 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, we didn't realize, and of course we didn't know, that eventually, during the evening, we would run into a storm which was 10 times worse than the one we had on D-Day. And we were rocking all over the place. No instruments, of course, again. We were just guided by the sun and so forth. So eventually it came to night time, and of course we were sick as dogs. I mean, so you could see the sick floating around in the bilge and stuff like that. And because we had no food or anything like that. So eventually we hit land, and we were on our own when we finally landed. So we made our way inland and eventually, of course, connected up to the marine organisation. So it was something like about 15 years later, in my marine magazine, there was a memorial to the Royal Marines landing craft on the 22nd of July. I said, that's my group. So, because I contacted my buddies in England, they said, oh yeah, Richard, that was our group coming back. I said, I didn't know anything about that. What was it? Well, evidently the storm was that bad that it sunk 11 of our landing craft and drowned all the Marines. So we ended up with something like about 35 unaccounted for Marines that were drowned at sea on the way back on that night. So of course we have that memorial now over there in Normandy, and we also have a duplicate of it in England where we trained near Southampton. So that was another situation where I looked in the mirror, I said, Richard, you bloody missed it again. Yeah, so I've counted my blessings all the way through Normandy and through the war when I was putting out fire bombs when the Germans were bombing London and stuff like that. So I've been lucky, and whatever happens now, I've still been lucky. But anyway, Henry,
Yes, sir.
you flew one of those big flying fortresses, didn't you?
Now you know why I chose to fly.
Yeah,
The heck with that water.
he flew in the big flying fortress.
Big bird.
I flew on a mission that took out Cherbourg. That was such a closely planned mission that we had just a few seconds between different groups had to hit a certain target. And that's when we were able to get you Cherbourg.
I guess I've always wanted to fly. I was not a pilot, but I was in the 8th Air Force. I was a ball turret gunner on a B-17. I learned to fly after I got out. I was taught by a WASP, the Women's Auxiliary Pilots. Llewellyn McIntyre. She could turn an airplane every way was loose. And I was a traveling salesman. I covered my territory for years in my own airplane. And my wife was always nervous. She thought that little bird should not fly. And I said, well, what you want me to be in danger, 6 hours or 3? Going from point A to point B. 3, I said, I'll fly. And I dreamed of being a pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And if the Army Air Corps had any sense, they would have made me a fighter pilot. I could have shot the Germans out of the sky in 6 weeks. Instead, they made me a gunner. Took me 6 months. No, I'm the baby of the Air Force. I was only 17 years old. I wanted to go in the cadet program, which I did. I got my father's permission to go, make it legal. And then they changed forms, and I had a new form to take on. He looked at it, he said, no, I won't sign this. I'm not going to send my son off to be killed. His son wasn't planning to get killed, but I mean, I went back and kept him. And I said, look, you got to use the old form. I can't. He said, when will you be 18? I said, October. He said, come back, you don't need anybody's permission. The government stopped men from going to the Army, the Navy, the Marines, whatever, and volunteering directly into the service. You had to register with your draft board because they wanted to know where you were. So I went to the draft board. And the lady's name was Mrs. Ann Campbell. And I said, I want to be drafted. She said, Mr. Yu, you're crazy. I said, that's been debated before, but I still want to be drafted. So I did get drafted. I was sent to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, right up in North Georgia, where we were assigned our serial numbers and took our oath. And a young man named Jimmy Spurlock, I knew him before the war. And he was in that crowd that day. We were assigned serial numbers. Mine is 34920702 and he was 0705. We left home on New Year's Eve, 1944. I mean 1943. We reported for duty January 1, 1944 to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. And from there, after we issued uniforms and our shots, we went to take basic training in Miami Beach, Florida. No Quonset huts for us, man. We went in fancy hotels. The government just took them over. And the one we were in was 13 stories. And that's where we wound up. And Double Time Greg said, you do not walk through the lobby of this hotel, you run. You don't walk up the stairs, you run. So we learned to run up the stairs and run down. And they decided that they needed to take my tonsils out. Well, I went to the hospital, had my tonsils out, and when I got back to the beach, Jimmy was gone. I found out later he went to gunnery school at Laredo, Texas. I was a high roller. I went to Las Vegas. But Las Vegas in 1944 was not the glamour capital of the West. You bet your eye you missed the whole town. And there was not much there, but Las Vegas Army Air Force's Flexible Gunnery School. I think they were probably the rate of efficiency that these people taught us gunnery is unequal. They started us out from scratch. They handed a table like this with a machine gun on it, covered with cosmoline. If you know what cosmoline oil is, you know it is sticky goo. That's to keep them from rusting. Said, now clean them. At the end of our training, they blindfolded you, said, now take it apart and put it back together again. And if you didn't put it back together again, you didn't graduate. Then they said that you will find yourself in combat in situations where you can't see what you're doing. You've got to feel with your hand. And it worked. But from there, I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was standing in the hall and I saw Jimmy Spurlock. And I said, what are you? He said, I just got here. I finished gunnery school. And we were being crewed up, and they had a sign on the wall, buddy crew, somebody you wanted to fly with. So we signed up and they put us on the same crew. We stayed together the rest of the war. And unfortunately, I'm the last man standing on my crew. They all got back, but they've all since gone. Jim was a tail gunner, and I was a ball gunner. When you're 18 years old, honestly, folks don't ever let them tell you that the kid 18 knows what the heck he's doing.
That's why they got
Because we were so unfamiliar with war. Oh, we'd seen all the movies with Errol Flynn, you know, and that kind of thing, but they always won. And we didn't know that in playing this game war, you could lose. But we applied ourselves. We went to Ardmore, Oklahoma, where we formed our crew and we learned each other. We became a machine, and every man had a move to make, and he made it. And we did it where, when we got to flying missions, I could tell you any time of a mission what anybody on that plane was doing. My pilot actually made me and several others sit in his seat after he got it off the ground, going on a mission. And I flew that airplane. Or that is, I guided it, and he said, I'm not trying to teach anybody how to fly an airplane. I'm hoping that if something happens to me and the co-pilot, one of you can keep this thing right side up long enough for the rest of you to bail out. A bombardier, Johnny said, every 30 minutes on a mission, bombardier the crew, oxygen check. You named your position, your oxygen pressure, and and you went from the tail to the waist, to the ball, to the radio, to the engineer, pilot, co-pilot, navigator. And Johnny said, gentlemen, this is serious business. If I ask for an oxygen check and you don't answer, if I have to come back there and check on you, you damn sure better be dead, you're gonna wish you would. And he did that every 30 minutes. Oxygen above 10,000 feet. Now, I've been to 18,000 with no oxygen and surviving. That doesn't mean you are smart, that was just luck. But from 10,000 feet up, you go on oxygen. If you do lose your oxygen, in about 4 or 5 minutes, you're unconscious. In 15 minutes, you're dead. And there's no comeback from that. My group lost 2 radio operators in 2 missions. They're behind their seat as a chute. They throw out these thin metal strips that look like Christmas tree icicles used to look. And that falls through the air, and the German radar hits it and sends it back a false reading. It's falling. It's as though the bombers are at 10,000 feet. We're at 20,000. And it helped. And on some missions, we had 3 lead aircraft. That's all they dropped. No bombs, just the metal chest. So they trained us with a efficiency that was unreal. They wanted us to come back. But then when you get down to the wire and it's time to fly your first mission, you have no idea what's going to happen. Our pilot flew a mission by himself, as a co-pilot with another crew, so they could see how he handled himself under condition. When he came back, he was white as her blouse. Just, you could tell, the shock. Our co-pilot had to fly 2 missions. Not because he didn't do good on the first one, they were short of pilots. And before they let them take us up. And we practiced everything over and over and over till it got routine. We started on our first mission on the 6th of November, 1944, an aircraft parked, Ingolstadt. And I know this doesn't sound like real thoughtful thinking. On our way back, it was sort of a milk run, light flight. The guy in the next squadron had a fire number 3 engine. He was advised to pull away from the group and bail out. He started to touch. 9 men gone in an instant. 1 million pieces of aluminum, a ball of fire across the sky. That aircraft blew up. And I remember thinking, a guy could get hurt doing this. And yeah, you could get killed too. But from then on, it just gets routine. It's hard to believe that the CQ comes in and wakes you up. CQ is in charge of quarters. He was a radio operator. He ditched in the channel, his crew got shot up real bad. They ditched in the channel, he got picked up by Air Sea Rescue, and he said, I don't want to fly anymore. I said, fine, you're CQ, permanent quarters. And he said, he would come in and wake us up when we were flying. Hey, Sweeney, what's the fuel load? 2,200 gallons. Oh, boy, a quickie. Get in and get back. If he said 2780, topped off after pre-flight, good Lord, we're going to be there all day. B-17 was a great airplane, believe me, folks, it was. It was tough, but it was slow. They had airliners that taxi out faster than we used to fly. And it just drags on and on. You just look down and see a German down, and 30 minutes later, it's still there. What we didn't know was about the jet stream.
Yeah.
We had 100-mile-an-hour tailwind, take you 4 hours to get to the target. You make a 100-degree turn and start back, you're making good ground speed of 50 miles an hour. And the Germans are flying around 400 miles an hour. But the gentleman not here who's having a family reunion, he's 96, he was a 306 bomb group. He and I have talked to groups all over the country, and not this part of the country. And he went back, I think, on his first mission was the 12th mission ever flown by the 8th Air Force. And at that time they had 25 missions you could go home. But the odds of ever finishing 25 missions were slim and none. Albert says he never saw an Allied fighter on any mission he flew. And I always teased him, I said, well, I was smarter than you were. I waited till they had P-51 flying escort before I started. We had that right, yeah, but yours was all German. Mine was made in USA. And really, it's the thing about a mission. If you could see those 51s crisscrossing back and forth, you didn't have to worry about the Germans. They're not stupid. They didn't want to tangle with those 51s. And, well, I'll tell you, Christmas Eve of '44 in the Battle of the Bulge, the largest aerial mission in the history of aviation took place. My group, the 487th, led that mission that day. 2,000 bombers, 936 fighters in the air at the same time, the same day. It can never be duplicated. And the reason is sort of funny, dollars and cents. A B-17 cost about $250,000. A B-52 cost $60 million. Now you take 2,000 and multiply it times 60 million, and you just bankrupted any nation. So they can't afford it. If you took all of the aircraft we have today in service, probably would not, there's a good chance it wouldn't even come close to equaling what was put in the air that one day. And we did it several times like that. 3rd of February of '45, we went to Berlin. Sort of a milk run to me because we didn't get much flack. And we made a turn after we dropped the bombs, and our pilot announced that he had just heard from headquarters that the last bomb group was just now crossing the English Channel inbound to Berlin, and we were on our way home. So that meant there was a bomber stream from London, English Channel to Berlin, and part of the way back.
How far is that, Henry? How many hundreds of miles?
Several hundred miles.
450?
Yeah, I would guess around 400 or 500 miles. We paid a terrible price for that war. I lost a lot of friends. Young. And these were not grown men, they were kids, 18, 19 years old. 26,000 were killed. That's more than the entire U.S. Marine Corps lost throughout the war. 28,000 were shot down and became prisoners of war. 17,000 were wounded. I hope and pray that no youth of this nation ever has to do that again. Now, we did the flying and we did the dying, or some of us did. But the unsung heroes of the 8th Air Force are ground personnel. Airplanes do not repair themselves. We've come back with 2 engines out. They'll never run again. We went to the mess hall, had a meal, went to bed. Those guys worked all night, and then the next morning at 10 o'clock you had 2 brand new engines on your airplane, ready for slow time. The medics. They were our lifeblood. After every mission, and you had to go through interrogation, they give you a shot of scotch if you signed your name. Now, the medical corps did this now. There's not a bunch of drunks there. And in November of '44, on Thanksgiving, and the group flew its 100th mission, they gave you 2 drinks for every name you signed. there was some forgery going on. And 6 of us flew over to the mess hall. We didn't use an airplane. And 3 of them crashed and burned. But those ground people, listen, I've seen young men up on the wing of an airplane with 30-degree, 20-degree weather, below freezing, with a mop and a bucket containing something called kill frost. Maybe you don't know, an airplane wing with frost on it will never fly. There was an airliner, Eastern or Air American, I don't know, here a couple of years ago, took off, and they found out it wouldn't fly because it had frost on the wings and it ditched in the river. He survived, it got everybody out, but that was luck. But and these kids up there mopping that wing in that temperature. There's always a little humor, not dirty humor, but if you are going on a mission, you're careful what you drink, how much coffee and water you consume. There are no restrooms. They are relief tubes. And we complained that our crew chief, he was a super guy. We told him we couldn't see anything in the morning at 4 o'clock out there. He put these little dome lights all over that airplane. He also put a relief tube in the tail and the ball, the bombardier's compartment. And I didn't have to crawl out of my ball turret, I mean, ever. And, except one time I called the boys up front, the navigator engineer, I said, the next time you gentlemen are going to use that facility, please give me some notice so I can turn my back to you. I said, you just splattered my sight window, and I've been firing at German planes all morning that weren't there. But
So Henry, how well they work when it was 60 below zero, which it typically was in the winter, with relief tubes?
they go out to do, because they're body temperature, but as soon as that hit that air, boom, that's a piece of ice. I wore, in the ball turret, I wore a shoe made of felt, about a ½ inch thick, so I wouldn't scratch the sight window. I had a heated insert that went in the shoe and into my pants, which had wired, but the coat had wires in it, like a heated blanket. And we have flown missions at 60 below zero. If you touch metal up there with your bare hand, you've been part of it. I wore silk gloves, pure silk. So if I ever had to work on the guns, my hand wouldn't freeze or stick to it. I know a boring meeting is when you fly, like if you got on a Delta airline flight here and flew to San Francisco and turned around and flew back and nothing happened, you'd be absolutely worn out by the time you got back. So if the flak was light and the fighters didn't hit us, a long-range mission could be boring. And it's just a thing you have to learn to live with. We did decide that the faster you fly them, the faster you go home. We had so many gunners that were surviving. We had a tour of 35, I only flew 32. The tail gunner, the ball gunner, and the waist gunner would come off at 32, and the spare gunners would go fly the last 3, or they'd never get home. And that's why I say the poor ground pounders, listen, the doctors, the line chiefs, the truck drivers, the KPs, had no time schedule. Well, they got killed or the war ended, whichever came first, they could come home. And they were there. And I've seen it expressed by some of the ground. They thought they owned those airplanes. They just lent them to us to fly on occasion. And they were proud of their work. And we were proud of them. So I hate to think of the trouble we'd been in without them. But if there are any questions,
I've got one. Henry, you talked about watching other planes go down, these missions. You're 28,000 feet, and other parts of the formation are getting shot up. You can see all these planes coming down at the same time. And I've heard different people respond to it in different ways. What was your experience seeing other planes going down, and how did other guys react to it? Is it
Well,
different?
there's one thing about being in the infantry. The guy next to you gets shot. You see him fall, you see the blood. That first mission I saw, 9 men disappear from the face of the earth. I saw the airplane and that ball of fire, I didn't see them. And there's a whale of a difference between seeing a piece of metal go down and seeing a human body go down. Some of the boys that we lost on Christmas Eve, 44, I went through basic training, gunnery school, phase training in Oklahoma, wound up in the same group, not necessarily the same squadron. George Banu and I was sent to school to be assistant flight engineers. Every man on the crew had 2 jobs. George, when we got to England, came to me and said, hey, they're taking a man off our crew. We had 10-man crews when we got there. We're going to have 9 men. He said, go to school with me, Henry, and we'll make tech sergeant, be flight engineers. I said, no, I can't leave Jimmy Spurlock. But George went on and took it. And I told people this. George flew his first mission and his last mission the same day. Only man in the group to get a scratch. He got hit in the head with flak and killed him instantly. I went to Sleepy Hollow, which was our base mortuary. I got to the door. I literally couldn't go in. I couldn't afford to look at him. Not the way it had to be after being hit in the head with flak. I remember George the way he was, and he's on that monument right out there in that memorial garden. It's a good thing that you didn't see in the sky the thing that. Well, Christmas Eve of 44, when we were getting so bad with those German fighters, we lost 114 men in 15 minutes. That's the only mission I ever flew that I thought I'd be dead. There was no panic, no pressure. I just knew I'd be dead. Santa Claus wouldn't have to look for me tomorrow because I wouldn't be there. And I just settled down and I started shooting at the fighters as they came in. And I got a FW-190, confirmed by my bombardier. And we went to interrogation when we got back, and the lieutenant, I told him what I did out, and he said, did you follow him down? I said, no, sir, I did not. Why didn't you follow him down? I said, Lieutenant, there were about 75 or 80 German fighters up there, not on fire, not going down. Not only did they deserve, they received my undivided attention.
Yeah, we did. A little busy.
But you do adjust.
Gentlemen, we appreciate your service and the opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you.